Okay, now I'm inserting the stud side of the busk. First of all, I've got my outer and my liner, which I'm using the same coutil in natural tan colour. First of all, I've sewn my seam allowance down here, down the front. Next I'm going to turn it the right way out and I'm going to iron it. Okay, I've now ironed this flat. When you iron it, make sure that your liner goes a little way underneath. You don't want it coming forward and showing. So just make sure you roll it a little bit so it just peeks underneath and you don't see your liner. Okay, next I've edge stitched about 2mm in from centre front all the way down. Okay, next we need to mark where the studs are going to go through. Conveniently on these pattern pieces they have marked where the studs are. So just going to take my piece of blotting paper, place it under there, and then I just get a pencil and put a little dot and that'll transfer through like so. Okay, you can now see here I've marked my little dots. So, okay, as I'm going to video this by myself, or you can just watch my other corset video, or there are lots of other corset videos out there on YouTube for inserting the busk. I'm using this tool called an awl. Basically I'm going through two thicknesses there to get a hole to come out, and then I'll be popping the knobs through the hole. Using a zipper foot, you then want to sew as close as you can to encase the rest of your knob side of the busk, like so. Okay, I've now been transferring my bone markings onto the other side, this front layer. I've tried using this trace down paper. It comes in different colours. I've got a yellow one here. And you basically just make sure you got, because one side's brighter than the other, make sure you got the bright side facing down. And then you put that over the top. Then you get a pencil and press really, really hard. It does take, because the fabric's quite stiff as well, it does take a good bit of pressing to get the lines to come through. And it will rub off a lot easier as well. Sorry about the lighting, it's a bit hard to pick it up, you can just see there. These channels, I've made them 6mm wide each one because the boning is 5mm. Right, next you need to match up your hook side of the busk, and you can see here I've put my liner together with the outside. Make sure you put good side to good side, and make sure it lines up with the other side and that the hooks are going to go over the knobs, and that it finishes in the same place. Now what you're going to do is, well, I've just taken a pencil and you need to just mark in between, because you'll be sewing down this line in a minute and you don't want to sew where the opening is, where these gold clasps are. So you just make a line like so, and in between you've got your gaps like so. And now we're just going to sew down these lines, and if I can I'll try and show you in a minute. You'll basically lift your pressure foot, when you get to here on your sewing machine, after doing it forwards and backwards. So we'll then lift up and then move on to the next one. Go down, forwards and backwards, lift up your pressure foot, put pressure foot back down, and sew the next one right to the bottom. Okay, I've just started sewing down these lines and I've just reached the end of the first line there. Now what I'll do is I'll just back stitch a couple of little stitches, then come forwards. Okay, now you see here I've lifted the pressure foot, then going to move it on to start the next line. And forgive me, I'm trying to film and do this at the same time. Okay, so I've moved on to start the next line, put the needle back in, and I'll just do a couple of stitches forward and back, and then again I'll run right to the end of this line here before the next opening, next gap. Okay, next you just want to make sure that your hooks or clasps match up with your sewing lines, which I think mine are pretty good. Yep, so that's all okay. Okay, next instructions say to press the seam open with your iron. You then need to fold it down that crease line. Okay, next you want to iron that flat so you've got a nice crisp edge. Make sure that your liner does not roll through to the front. So what I do is just make sure that the liner is just a millimetre behind the front piece. The next thing you want to do is to find your holes where your openings are for your clasps, and to thread through 2 pins so that you don't sew over there. That's 2 pins for each side, top and bottom of each opening. Then what we're going to do is, if you remember on the other side we ran a 2mm line down the side there, we're going to do exactly the same here. So when we get to the pins, you're going to go forwards and backwards a couple of stitches, lift up your foot, then carry forwards and backwards, carry on. It's the same principle as you've just done in the last step earlier when you were doing your gaps. And you do that right way to the bottom, and it should look like this when you're finished. I'm just starting to sew my 2mm edge, and I've come to the first pin. I've done a back stitch, and now what I'm going to do is lift the pressure foot, take it out, and you want to leave some threads. I'll explain why after, so I'm just going to cut those off. So then you've got 2 tails, one top and bottom for after. And then I'm just going to pop this back under the sewing machine. And where I've got the second pin for that opening, I'm just going to start off with another forwards and backwards stitch, run it down and finish it off here, and then do exactly the same or cut off some more tails. Basically repeat that, be very careful not to carry on sewing over where your openings are. Okay, it should now look a little bit like this. You should have two tails sticking out before each gap. Like so. Next thing we need to do is all those threads that were hanging up on the outside, you need to pull them through to the middle. And to do that, you just need to thread up your needle, then go through one little stitch, then right through to the middle and just pull your thread through. There we go, so now I've pulled my needle through, pull the thread through, like so. Okay, now you need to push through your clasps between the seams, like so. And you need to push it as far as you can so it's nice and tight. Okay, next you want to do exactly what you did on the other side, and first of all pinning this in place or tacking, whichever you wish to do, by pinned. You want to sew as close as possible to make sure your clasp is securely in place. Again, as I say, use a zipper foot for this. That completes that stage. After I've marked out these boning channels for the 5mm boning, I'm going to sew stitching lines over these on both sides. Okay, next I'm going to start joining all my pieces together. Now, according to the instructions, this is made a totally different way to however I've made anything before. You end up with your seam flaps on the outside. So meaning that your liner will be showing through on the flaps. So to do this, you've got to mount your fabric first on your next piece. This is piece number 2. And note the way that I've mounted it. I've also sewn on my boning channels ready to go. So now what should happen is it should end up looking like this. So you can just see your liner there on this side and that side is coming through. And you end up with neat seam on the inside. And I'll just go on to the next piece. Okay, I now have the side front done. Piece number 3. Basically following the same principle. Okay, I've now joined all the other pieces together except the back one. Your back piece needs to have a facing on it first, so excuse me, I've sewn my two pieces together and I've pressed it with the iron so it's a nice crisp edge. Okay, next you want to run a sewing stitch 2mm in from the edge. This is exactly the same as what you did on your busk. Next I've gone ahead and I've sewn my boning casings ready on the back panel. This will be where number 1 goes, and then here's where your eyelet goes, and then bow number 2 will go here. I happen to have some spare straight boning hanging around, so I'm going to be using this. Now this is already 1 centimetre wide, so I've made my channels 1.3 centimetres wide, just an extra 3 millimetres so that it can fit into the casings. And you'll be having one here and one here. When you come to mark your eyelets, I started 1.5 centimetres from the top, and then each dot is 2 centimetres apart, and you should end up with roughly 1.5 centimetres from the bottom as well. Okay, the next thing I've done is put the eyelets in. I wasn't strong enough myself to put those in, so I had to get my dad to do it. I say I'm not lucky enough to own one of those eyelet machines, so these are gold eyelets, about 4 millimetre diameter. This is what I've used to punch the holes. Now, to save me showing you how to do this, there are quite a lot of YouTube tutorial videos out there already to show you how to put eyelets into corsets and bodices and lots of other things. So if you wish to know how to do that, just look it up. I've next gone ahead and trimmed these seams back to about 3 millimetres, tidied up the bottoms all the way around the edges, making sure everything lines up on the top and the bottom. And next, just here you can see I've been marking out my other boning channels, my external ones that are going to go on the outside. To do this, I've used the same coutil fabric, and I've cut my own bias strips. And to do this, I've got my own bias maker, which I bought offline last year. It's quite handy for making your own strips. And again, there are lots of tutorial videos out there that show you how to cut bias strips on the 45-degree angle, and you just choose your favourite video to show you how to do that, just to save me explaining that part. But basically my boning is going to be 7mm wide, so the casings have got to be at least 1 centimetre wide, because then, as you can see here, you will be sewing in a couple of millimetres from each side, so then you're losing more off each edge. So you don't want to make your strips too narrow, or by the time you've sewn your lines on, you won't be able to get your boning through the channels. That's a very important tip there. So I'm just going to carry on. So I've sewn the casing, I've only done the seams so far on this side, do the same the other side, and sew them down where I've marked them. Now there should have been another casing here on the pattern, but because I'm quite small already, the corset was too big, so I had to take a lot off at the back and a lot more in at the seams. So by doing that, it's brought obviously the width of each panel in a lot more, and have no longer got room from the boning channel here. But I'm not too worried about that, because I'm going to have 2 straight bones here, and I'm not really too fussed about there not being any boning here anyway, so I'll be back in a few minutes. Also as well, I lost a lot more off the second panel in from the front, which means that with just a bit of a squeeze I could have got the 3 boning channels in that I needed, but I didn't really want to go for a squeeze, so I decided to just leave it at 2 bones. So now I only have 2 there. again, because I'm so small and small bust, I've had to modify it from the pattern just a little bit. Okay, the next thing to do is to tidy up your top edge. I'm going to leave the bottom for now. I'm just going to concentrate on the top. Just tidy it all up, make sure it's neat, make sure your curve is how you want it. Obviously now's the time to make any changes. If you're really not happy with it curving, you might want it straightened out more. You know, it depends how much room you've left as well. I mean, this is quite a short corset lengthwise. So the next thing I've got to do is I've got to secure everything. So 0.5 centimeters in, I'm going to run a little line across the top just to make sure everything stays in place, and I'll do that on both pieces. Okay, as you can just see here, I've run my stitching line across the top to secure everything. Okay, now next I need to put some bias binding around the top edge. So I have some here I've already done. It measures 4.5 centimeters wide. And over here, as earlier, I got my bias binding makers to help me make my tape. Okay, next thing you want to do is to get your boning. I'm using spirals and straight to the back. At the front here, as you know, there were the tiny channels that were for 5mm wide boning. So this is what I've got here. Again, there's lots of tutorials out there to help you with boning, cutting, putting the tips on, etc. So I won't go into all that. Basically, you just need to, I'm trying to hold the camcorder here and do this at the same time, but you just need to measure, sorry I've got the wrong one, measure how long you need each one. And you measure 1.5 centimeters from the top and the bottom because you need room to put your bias tape on. And I can't show you all of this, but you get the idea. You just thread it through like so. So it's going through those channels. Then you just push it till it's at least that 1.5 centimeters inside, so it's about here. Again, giving you enough room to put your bias tape on the bottom. Now, I'm very lucky. I have my dad to cut this at work for me. He uses an industrial guillotine, because personally, I am not strong enough to cut this by hand. And as I don't know until this point how long I need my bones, it's really hard when ordering it to tell the people how much you want, and they'll probably charge you anyway. I expect to have them cut to the exact lengths that you need. So if I didn't have my dad, I wouldn't be able to do any of this, so thank you, Dad. So this one here is the 7mm wide, and these go on the wider channels that I've made, like so. Okay, going on to the two channels on the very back now next to the eyelets, you need to use straight steels for these. Now, I had some hoop cage boning lying around from a cage I made for my Cinderella dress, and it's basically got, two pieces of a very thin steel wire in it, which you can just see there, and the rest of it is plastic coated. Now, really, you're not supposed to use this for corsets, but it's straight and it's strong, and it's got a bit of bend to it. Anyway, so to save me buying any more, just for the sake of doing two back panels, I'm using this. But I'm not in any way saying that you should use it for yours. Okay. Next, you'll see that I've covered the end in some sellotape. I've used this green insulation tape, it's called, and I've just folded that round the end, and then I've put some clear sellotape at the end of that. It's just that when you're poking these through, it's makes it that bit easier as well to get it through, and it will stop the ends piercing through your corset or causing any damage. So I'll just go ahead and do the other one, and then I'll thread it through my channels, and I'll be ready to put the bias binding on the bottom. Okay, next thing I'm doing is sewing my lace on. You can just see the front here. I've turned the ends in on the fronts like so, and just tacked it to the back. I first, as you can see here, I've only gone on and just tacked it in places along the way around the top. And you will see at the moment that we're going around the curves, you're having quite a lot of issues with it pulling up. So what I'm going to do is, after I've tacked it here, I just need to pull this lace down in place and just tag it in to hold it. I don't really know any other way myself how to do this, so that's what I'm going for. You can see why I've done this side compared to this side where it's all sticking up. I've catch stitched it in place with just a few stitches every now and then. Show you the back here. So now it's all nice and flat compared to this side where it's all sticking up. At the ends I've decided to, so I can still lace it up, sorry, there's the holes. Some corsets you can either put the last couple of eyelets on last and put your lace on first, or if your lace has got holes big enough, what they would have done is just poke the lace through the holes carefully, even going through the lace itself, but I've just decided to leave that bit open so I can still get the lace through.